what we do, no matter what.
Committee of the Whole will please come back to order.
Bottom line is, you guys think you should have told them Miller time, not Germanic time. We think you want a segment.
Maybe they are on Miller time.
Dale, next time tell them you're on Miller time, not Germanic time.
You can hear the pops.
It's Miller time. Get in there.
These are good discussions. They're probably better when we know where we're at.
That's why I said, you have to know the macro before you knew the micro.
I'm first one in the pool. We got to get to the pool first.
Okay, fine.
What is wrong with it?
You're going to run the ED portion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's not the work you don't do.
Yes, and
The sooner you get done, the sooner everybody.
I asked the council president at what point she would strangle me if I didn't bring this part to a close and turn it over to the next part, which is the economic development part of the meeting. And I was able to negotiate it to 4:30, so we got a little over an hour yet to work on this today. And at this point,
Mr. Miller, that's the outside.
that's the outside. Okay.
It's okay to finish early. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
it's okay to finish.
At this point, I would like to take the 4-page document, which is the motion that I made that contains the list of prospective amendments, and just for purposes of discussion to get something out on the table for discussion, I would like to make a motion that the resolution 2011-291 be amended with the amendments listed in this document, and ask for a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Now what I'd like to do is
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Before we make any amendments, what I'd like to do is to just go through the document and as briefly as I can just explain each of the items so that everybody knows what's in it. And at that point, I would make any. Then we can have any discussion, comments, suggestions for amendment or whatever. So if you look on page 1, first of all, the first item on the general fund sets aside money in anticipation of hiring a director of consumer affairs, $75,000 in the first year, $100,000 in the second year, figuring that it probably would not get underway until the first quarter. Does everybody have this? Everybody, please find this 4-page document. Okay. Okay. Second item, upgrade business administrator's position for full-time in the Planning Commission. The third item is an item that that OBM recommended. It reallocates the Blue Ribbon Task Force budget and actually saves $156,000 per year. The fourth item, as I mentioned earlier, it creates a new reserve item for the enterprise IT development. And if you also in your packet, I had distributed an item that Director Mowry submitted and updated on November 9th, which prior to this we had seen the capital improvement, like the hardware, the servers, the large physical IT equipment, but we did not see these items on the enterprise side. So this proposal creates that enterprise IT reserve, $2 million in 2012. The next item reduces the allocation for Inspector General to $50,000 for the software program, which we received testimony is sufficient. That's a reduction of $72,000 from what was in the budget book, not the $100,000 that had previously been reported, but that's what we save on that. The next item is Justice Services administrative staff reductions per OBM recommendation, and then that's offset by the administration's recommendation to fund the safety grant programs. This is where the county helps the municipalities provide match money so that they can obtain significant state dollars for safety grants. Next item is the administration's proposal, the crime lab. Next item is the disparity study, pegged at $400,000. Other communities have done more, but I know the administration is focused on identifying the narrow set of information that's really needed to be effective, and we're hoping between that and perhaps some collaboration with other agencies like the City of Cleveland RTA and the Regional Sewer District that we can bring this in at a somewhat lower number. Item 10 is a very small item. Purchase of a scanner by the Public Defender's Office. Cost $5,000. The state kicks in a little bit. Next item is to adjust public defender supervisor salaries. Currently, the supervisors make less than the staff, and this corrects that situation. Next item is an administration item, GPS subscription, and actually, this is a total of $140,000 item, and part of it's here. Part of it's in the Department of Engineering, and part of it is in other funds outside of the general fund. And the purpose is that it allows the administration to keep track from a central location of where all of the county's vehicles are and where they're traveling. Next item is the parking garage equipment and staff adjustment. This is an OBM recommendation as well, and it's a savings of about $31,000 per year. And next item is the protection of DCFS workers in the sheriff's office. And finally, the soil and water conservation subsidy set at $75,000. Under Human Services, number 1, we have the Adams Board proposed increase subsidy, $750,000. Second is replacement of staff in Children and Family Services. Third is the residential treatment contract, which provides an alternative to our incarceration decision item requested from Common Pleas Court. Fourth is the universal pre-K. It was requested by the administration. Councilwoman Simon also had it on her list. Number 5 is increased funding for Help Me Grow to help offset huge state cutbacks that they've suffered. 6 is providing some additional staff and employment in family services, where the information we have is that they're really close to the breaking point in terms of being able to keep up with the need for determining eligibility for federal programs. Next is homeless services, overflow funding for the women's shelter, $40,000. The homeless services rehousing program, which lost their federal funding, so this provides some replacement. Next is the Metanoia project, which we heard some testimony about to help the homeless during the coldest winter months. Next is the juvenile court diversion program. And finally, the entrepreneurship program for returning prisoners in the Office of Reentry. So those are the human services items. They total about $3.7 million per year, including the administration item of $800,000. In the other funds, we have the additional mediator for domestic relations, $37,500 per year. Not expected to be any general fund cost because the domestic relations charges a fee of $250 per mediation, which is expected to cover the cost. Item number 2 is simply a pass-through. The current budget has the land reutilization pegged at $6 million, but the actual number is $7 million, and it simply passes through the money from their funding sources to the land bank. Next item is an item that is actually already in the budget, the general fund reserve for information services, provided here, proposed to be used to spend a portion of the $2.8 million in capital equipment needs identified for 2012, with the expectation that during the course of the year that the administration would develop a long-term funding plan for the remainder of the IT capital improvements, which are considerably more substantial. Next item is purchase of vehicles. This is an OBM recommendation. It would be funded from the fleet fund. Money is available to do so. Next item is the GPS subscription, which I mentioned already. Next item is for additional staff in the dog warden's office, and the dog warden is funded through kennel fees, and the kennel fees, the kennel fund currently has a balance of $500,000 and is expected to increase that balance by $300,000 in 2012. So it's more than sustainable that we could provide the additional staff to take care of the animals. Number 7, another part of the GPS program. Number 8, sanitary engineer, $50,000 for a crew truck and trailer. This is an administration item. It's paid for by sanitary district funds. 9 is additional sewer cleaning staff, $132,441. The hope and expectation is that we'll be serving some additional communities through the sanitary sewer program. And finally, the solid waste district intern program, $19,000 per year, solid waste district fund. And then we have some items that are not financial transfers per se. Number 1, that in the budget presentation we would like Treasury to be presented separately from fiscal, because that's what the charter currently states. 2nd, regional collaboration to be presented separately from development. 3, narrative to provide a fuller explanation of planned use of reserve funds and the impact of those uses on the balances. 4th, the public assistance fund in the aggregate should be listed showing the projected changes in its balance. That's currently not in the budget book. 5, the narrative to focus on biennial rather than 3-year impacts in the narrative, while maintaining the 2014 budget estimates in the schedules. The reference to drawing $22 million from the public assistance fund, we thought for a long time that was in 2012 and 13, where in fact it included 2014, so we just want that clarified. Next, the intent of council is to maintain a general reserve to expenditure ratio of not less than 25%, declaring our intent, and then the expectation going forward is that the council is going to consider legislation as to whether we want to set a permanent policy. 7, council declares its intent that OBM provide updates regarding performance on the 2012 and 13 budget on a monthly basis, with more detailed reports on a quarterly basis. I think this will. I think the point has been made. Once we pass this budget, we do need to monitor the trends and the changes very carefully, and this provides for that. Number 8, the appropriation for Metro Health Hospital is specifically dedicated to provide match for the proposed federal Medicaid waiver to the extent and at such time as Metro Health is able to obtain such waiver, and is otherwise specifically dedicated for charity care. And finally, that the Law Department and the Office of Budget and Management are hereby requested to prepare a substitute version of 2011-291 incorporating the above provisions to be available for the Committee of the Whole meeting scheduled for November 17th. And in preparing the substitute resolution, OBM and the Law Department may use its best judgment in preparing technical aspects, such as the allocation of appropriations to categories like personal expenses, capital outlays, and other expenses. So that provides a summary of what's in the item before us. Ms. Conwell.
I just want to ask a question. So from this blue sheet, the budget sheets that Trevor prepared, it's looked like it's gotten a lot smaller on this.
To Councilman Conwell, that's correct. What as the executive pointed out, obviously not everything was recommended. Not everything that was suggested could be incorporated into the budget. And in the olden days, what would be done is that the council would go into some private place and sit around the table and hash it out and decide on something and then bring it out in public and pass it. But under the new regime, we can't do that. And so I thought it would be useful if a proposal were brought forward that tried to merge together what was most commonly suggested and most strongly supported, and also incorporating the suggestions of some of our colleagues that we try to show some restraint, and so this is put forward as a starting point. But obviously, anybody can offer any amendment, plus or minus, and should bring anything forward that anyone feels that they want to have individually discussed and considered. Ms. Conwell, then Councilman Brady.
Well, with the start of that, then I would like to make an amendment regarding the equity plan ordinance that I have been working on diligently to. I didn't think when I initially thought it that it would cost anything, but just to set aside at least $200,000, just in case it in the long run it will cost something to have those funds set aside. But going forward, I really don't think that there will be funds. I think that the executive staff can find some kind of staff to work on the equity ordinance within their own departments. So I don't think that it would need additional staff, but I just want to be able to have that money set aside in case it does. And if it doesn't, then it stays in the general fund anyway.
The reason why I did not recommend including this is basically exactly as you stated, that the council has not yet decided exactly how it's going to handle the equity plan, and there is a chance that it will be done in a way that does not require additional staff. And as you know, the administration brings forward every 2 weeks a measure that proposes various changes in the budget that's currently in place, and that's something that council certainly has authority to initiate as well. And so, what I would like to suggest and ask, I think this is an item, I certainly strongly support doing something in this area, but I think that it's an area that it would probably be good if we would wait and see what's needed, and then at that point we can incorporate it. But if you don't want to hold off and wait and see, then we can vote on the amendment.
Well, I can concur with you. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't lost in the sauce, so to speak, and that
believe me, I
somewhere.
will not allow it to get lost in the sauce because I believe in it. Thank you. And Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we're supposed to be getting into the weeds here, but there's a lot of weeds here, and
there are a lot of weeds.
We've got about 40 minutes, and I'm not sure how far through the weeds we're going to get in 40 minutes. But what I'd like to ask, with your starting point, and again, I appreciate you creating a document for us to work with. If we were to, and just imagine, if we were to just adopt your budget, Dale Miller's budget,
Well, before you,
okay.
I just want to point out,
I know
this
that's
is
not what you're suggesting.
this is not my budget.
Okay, it's not your
You know,
budget.
there are
Okay, let's call it the
there
starting
are
point
items
budget.
that I recommended originally that I scaled back and eliminated, and significant numbers of items that other people suggested that I put into here.
All right, I'm sorry.
Hopefully it's up to everyone to decide how good of a consensus it is, but it's more than just my budget.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
I'm trying to get a sense of a bigger picture again. We've kicked around some things. You've got some stuff on here about a 25% reserve, for the general fund. If I'm not wrong, I think there's a consensus, for that, for instance, I'm wondering how much, in terms of the starting point budget, how much more is spent in the general fund, and how much more is spent? Maybe it's down here somewhere, and I haven't seen it. I mean, have you added it up? How much more is spent
yes,
in Health and Human Services?
And actually,
where can I find that?
There's a very short document also in your packet.
Page 5.
Just 4 or 5 lines, but it goes directly to your question.
Oh.
And at the top of the sheet it says, comparison, starting point to as introduced.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see
General fund increases by $2.6 million or 0.76% in 2012, and $640,000 or 0.18% in 2013. On the human service side, it increases by $3.6 million the first year and $3.7 the second year, which is about 1.6% of the human services spend. On other funds, it's $762,000 in 2012 and $712,000 in 2013. I would point out that that does not include the $1 million item for the land bank, because that's just a pass-through and not an actual spend. And for total expenditures, it's $7 million or 0.55% in 2012 and $5 million or 0.4% in 2013. So that tells you what the difference is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's really helpful. I didn't know. I did miss that document. Does this starting point document include additional, although modest, the additional requests by the administration that have come in since the budget was proposed?
All of the items that were requested by the administration last Wednesday were included in this document.
Okay. Now, this starting point budget then would call for a 0.5%, 55%, 0.5% increase in 2012 over the administration's budget.
That's correct.
And
including some items that the administration asked for.
Well, right. So less than that.
Yes.
And a less than 0.5% increase for 2013, which also includes items that the administration has asked for.
That's correct.
So this starting point budget, do you have any estimate outside of the administration's requests? What percentage, both for the general fund and for the it's probably down here, and you can probably explain it to me, I'm sure. What percentage that the starting point budget, excluding the executive's asks, amount to?
Well, for the general fund, the primary administration request on the general fund side is $150,000 in the first year and $500,000 in the second year for the crime lab. And so if you look at 2013, if you back out the back out the 500,000, you're down to 140,000, and so it's almost flat.
So these are so the administration, what the administration is asking for over and above this starting point, it's relatively, it's just really insignificant. It's not almost worth the discussion, right?
In 2013, we asked for very little, very, very little beyond what the administration requested. In 2012, there are two significant items. Number one is the 400,000 for the disparity study, and number two is the $2 million for the enterprise IT reserve account, which is something that I think the administration wants, but it's not something they specifically requested, and that I felt needed to be added so that we could work on IT on both the
on that point,
on both sides at
on
the
that
same
point,
time.
Mr. Chairman. I think I would assume we all agree with that as well. I mean, there's some absurdity to us having to ask for the money that clearly the administration needs and wants. I don't understand. That's a very odd situation to find yourself in. I'm for adding this money. I just can't fathom why it's not there to begin with. I know that's not a question for you. It's a comment of my own.
Well, I think that one thing that the council contributed to this process is that we brought forward the fact that there is both a capital side and an enterprise operating side to upgrading the county's IT systems, and in the original presentations, the capital side was very well presented, but the other side was not presented. So we kind of brought both of them together and put them on the table, and maybe we decide that the $2 million in the automation reserve is enough to get us through both of them in 2012. But as I look at what's needed, I didn't think that it did so. So that's why I put that out.
Final comment, and I want to try to keep track of the big picture as we. I know the budget has to be specific on each item. There's no getting around it. And doing this way in public is, like you say, unique. But there's also, a sense of trying to get a consensus for. The lion's share of this is Health and Human Services, and so I think having some consensus about what kind of reserve we think is prudent for Health and Human Services is an important place to have this discussion, rather than one point after another out of context with that. If we're talking about Children's Family Services, we've got to be talking about it within the context of some kind of consensus that we have about what kind of reserve that we agree on is appropriate, whether we have an agreement there or not. I listened to the executive, and with all due respect, talk about staffing levels, and I have to say, if I understand the executive properly, I don't agree. And I think it might be necessary to have some people in here that are experts on Health and Human Services talk about why these staffing levels are, I believe, inadequate. Because just randomly selecting, how many people you want to work for the county government is not, I don't think, any way to run a government. We're here to provide services, and in so much as they don't threaten the health of the financial health of the county or the bond rating of the county. It's not how many people we have on our staff; it's that we have the right amount of people on our staff. Now, I think we probably agree on that. That the executive believes that he's trying to find the right number of people, but we're also trying to find the right number of people. And, we may have a different take on what the right number of people is based on what we're hearing from people that have expertise in this area. because what I'm hearing from people of expertise in this area is that we are understaffed, very much understaffed. And I think that, quite frankly, just to be clear, I think there's several million more dollars in Health and Human Service money that can be spent here without going anywhere near a reserve level that's acceptable. And I don't want to spend it just to spend it. I want to make that clear. But I don't want to, understaff these agencies that the voters have been so generous about supporting the services for either.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions about the suggested starting point. The revenue piece, as far as the Health and Human Services levy, which is critical to obviously how much money you have to spend, that's based upon a 5% reduction in property values. Is that my understanding?
That's correct. That's the number that OBM has listed and factored into their budget calculations.
And I would but I would welcome the opportunity to hear whether or not there was a range when that number was picked, Mr. Rubino, or was that the best case scenario, worst case scenario, midpoint of the scenario, because that really drives. We all know the property values are going to come down. We all know that we have already fixed the millage at our last meeting that we're going to go out to the voters on. And we all know that it is not going to raise as much money as the very last time that this levy came before us. So we've already decided we're going to have millions of dollars less based on what we certify to the voters. So the 5%.
Councilman Schwan, I would like to commend you for an excellent question. Director.
How's that? Mr. Chairman and Councilman Schron, we use 5% as, I wouldn't call it a best case scenario, but looking at average decline across the state, we thought we'd start with 5%. It's still early to tell. We'll be updating our revenue projections beginning next year, but I think if we threw in a 10%, perhaps we would over-adjust or overcompensate at this point of budget development. So I think 5% it's an anticipation and recognition that we assume there'll be a countywide loss in property values. We've shown the corresponding decrease in property tax revenue. So it's a good starting point to place that assumption. We will see less revenue because property values are going to drop by some amount in 5%. It's not 100% scientific, but at least we have a placeholder to anticipate that loss in revenue. And you do have another decision point coming up in 2 years with the smaller levy. Do we hold that at a renewal, or do you perhaps change the millage on that levy when it's up for voter approval in a few years?
But this amount dictates the amount that will go into the reserves, will it not, into the Health and Human Services levy? And if you have picked 5% incorrectly, if it gets worse, because we all know that the land bank is piling up land, that's going to have a much more significant effect on the property values, so obviously of those properties. Is that the net 5%, or is that just the values of those that are on the tax rolls?
No, Mr. Chairman, that would be what is on the tax rolls. So the assessed valuation of the county property does not include foreclosures and things such as land bank holdings, I believe, but it would be what is the assessed valuation. Right now, for example, for 2011 collections, we're looking at an assessed valuation of over $29.5 billion. So we're assuming that $29+ billion will decrease by about 5%, and it will result in lower property tax collections coming into the levy reserve. There are other things acting on that reserve, too. Remember, we're deciding how many levy dollars to transfer over to the operating budgets based on state and federal revenue and also the level of anticipated expenditures on those programs. So those also act on that bottom line, that operating surplus or deficit in the levy, and also the resulting reserve at the end of each year. So it's not just the revenue piece that we're factoring in. Other factors are at play. And we'll have to see going into next year. As part of our monthly and quarterly update, we'll be looking closely at all of those factors, not just the anticipated loss in property tax value.
What would your worst case scenario?
Mr. Chairman and the council member, I don't have a worst case scenario in mind. I would think between 5 and 10% is probably likely. The good thing for the county is while we do have decreasing values of property across the county, there are areas where property values have increased or held steady. So it's hard to see what the final net result will be countywide, and that's what makes it difficult. We did also realize, if you recall, a 5% drop in assessed valuation during the 3-year update process that completed in 2009. So we've seen a little bit of pressure relieved because we've already seen some drop. Hopefully, maybe since we've anticipated that already in the current collection, that the 5 or 10% will hold and we won't lose more than we're anticipating for the levies.
5 or 10% is double, obviously.
It is.
Double the loss in property valuation if you go to the 10%. So have we seen any numbers that calculates that before we start spending money as to what that would be, and how difficult would that be for you to give us that range of where we're going?
Mr. Chairman and the council member, the 5% drop,
We have that.
It's 10 million, so 10% would be approximately 20 million loss. All things remaining the same, of course, but that's about what it would be.
It just scares me where property values are still going, having just sold a house that
Yes.
we lost over 30% in the valuation of that house. And so it scares me as to where property values are going. And if we're banking on 5% and it comes in at 10, and we spent $5 or $6 million, and you're already telling us the worst. I mean, it could go to another $10 million on top of that. Next question. Please listen to it real carefully before you answer. Sorry about that. Anybody wants to follow up on that? Yeah.
I just want to share one question that I asked during the break, which was when we would know, and by about the 1st of June of next year, we should know what the total is of the reappraisals that we're suggesting to the property owners. I mean, there's still room for appeals and adjustments and so on. But at that point, we will know very closely what we've got. So by mid-year, we'll know what we've got.
Mr. Chair,
Another reason to wait.
just to follow on that, just some simple math. Every 1% that we're deficient is $2.25 million.
Mr. Chairman, that's a rough approximation. Just keep in mind the smaller levy has a fraction left to climb as far as effective millage is concerned, so there's not 100% loss for the smaller levy, whereas the 4.8, it's 100% loss. For every 1% drop in AV, there's a 1-for-1 loss in revenue on that levy. Smaller levy, because if you're familiar with HB 920 and the laws that govern effective millage, we have a little bit of room to grow on the small one, but not that much.
Mr. Chair, just a follow-up. To put that in context, that's about the equal amount of the property tax collected for the entire city of Independence. That's what 1%. If you want to put it in relative terms of a city, it's effectively us losing the property tax value of Independence.
It's a lot of tax.
Well, I think that's the value of this next other phase of the exercise. We're weighing with some what ifs, but when you start talking about fixing the reserves, we need to also wrestle with the what ifs. This is not even a what if. We know that we're going to lose property value. It's just a matter of how much more potentially could we be looking at from that going forward. And again, listen please before you answer. As far as this budget, what cost impact, or no, have you had any cost impacts calculated into this budget for purposes of collective bargaining? Please don't answer the percentages if you have, but is that factored in as we go forward down the road for these next couple of years?
Mr. Chairman and Councilman Schron, no, we don't have any estimate for any impact of collective bargaining agreements. So if some of the other larger contracts and with the members getting 1 or 2% cost of living allowances, that currently is not included in our proposed budget for the salary lines.
And I just ask that when you start wrestling with these big ticket items, before we start spending money, that some of these things are not even in there. And how about for non-collective bargaining employees?
Mr. Chairman, no, we don't have any anticipated level of salary increases for non-bargaining employees right now.
And we've heard from, I know Mr. Rogers brought this up at the last meeting, that it's been almost 4 to 5 years for some of those, and we have not factored that in regards to this also. So thank you.
I would I would point out that there's always positive and negative potential items out there. And on the positive side, just to name a few, we have the $1.2 million per year that we think we have a pretty good chance to get regarding the 8th District Court of Appeals costs. And then there's also the possibility that we can get back some pretty significant dollars if the medical mart continues to come in on budget. So it's a matter of weighing the threats and weighing the opportunities and trying to come up with something that delivers services and does not take unacceptable risks. And our challenge is, where is that proper balance point? Councilman Greenspan.
Are we still entertaining amendments and questions to your list? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. A question before I propose an amendment. Number 4 under general fund, the general fund reserve has to do with the enterprise IT reserve. Is this outside the CIP, the capital improvements budget? Is this in addition to that?
Yes. If you look in your packet under the IT budget planning, and if you look on page 5, where it says 2012 automation reserve expense projects. This relates to a number of items that are not hard physical assets, capital type expenses. The Director Mowry's proposal suggested using the automation reserve to fund these projects. If you did that, the automation reserve would not be available to fund any of the capital projects, which are estimated at $2.8 million in 2012 and significantly greater dollars potentially in the out years. What I suggested is slightly different. What I suggested is that we use the automation reserve to pay for a portion of the 2012 capital projects, and that the administration during that year come up with a long-term funding program for the remaining capital projects, and that we create a new $2 million reserve, which would be the enterprise IT reserve, which would fund the items that are listed on this page.
Okay, thank you. Then I'd like to make an amendment, Mr. Chairman, to add to, I won't call it your list, but to the list, to add on other items, number 10. And the intent here is to include a reserve for the HHS levy fund. So it'd be the same language. The intent of council is to maintain an Health and Human Services fund reserve to expenditure ratio of not less than 15% throughout 2012 and 2013. No, I'm adding number 10. No, this is
Councilman Greenspan is proposing to add a 10th item, which would follow the very last item on page 4. It would be item number 10, to read as follows. The intent of council is to maintain a human services levy reserve fund balance to expenditure ratio of not less than 15% throughout 2012 and 2013. we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Chairman, just some clarity, because I don't believe I have a problem with this at all. But just some clarity. Are we talking about one fund, the reserve fund? Are we talking about the combination of both the public assistance fund and the reserve fund?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can answer that. Since the PA fund is established as a creature of the Health and Human Services Fund, the PA fund would not be included in this, just the HHS levy fund.
Well, then let's. I don't think I have a problem. I don't think I have a problem with this. What are the numbers? What are the actual numbers?
Well, currently it's right around 20%, and that percentage is not expected to change during 2012 or 13 under either proposal, because to the extent that we draw on reserves, it's going to be done through the Public Assistance Fund. So Councilman Greenspan is proposing to set an intended target minimum of 15% for that reserve, which is currently at 20%, and that seems reasonable to me.
Right. Yeah, it's on this sheet.
Okay. Well, I know I was given I was looking at the percentages in Hamilton and Montgomery. Montgomery is more like we are. They've got a combined Health and Human Service levy. In Franklin County, they have a separate one, and also one of the other big urban areas. And their percentages were, less than 15, all the way down to 9. So I mean, I think that that 15 is a healthy reserve fund. My only question is, if in case of emergency, how would we tap into this fund?
Yeah, well, Mr. Chair, if I may answer that.
Please proceed.
Sure, Mr. Chair. In the ordinance that it will be presented through council on the 6th is a protocol as to how that. If we need to breach, if we need to go lower, if we need to tap into the 15.
Unlikely, but yes.
Right. In the event that we do, now my ordinance, as you would imagine, is fairly conservative. It would require. There's a reason I sit to the right from this perspective. It would require a unanimous vote of council. However, that's a starting place. If it's 8 members, as we heard Mr. Steen, 6 he felt was too low to break below it. I'd be amenable to amendments to that when we present it, but it would require a supermajority of council in order to break through that.
Well, that was a debate for another day, of course.
Yeah, I would add that until such time as we pass such legislation, this would be a resolution that contains that statement of intent, and if there were an emergency and we had to draw on reserves below that percentage, certainly a successor piece of legislation passed by council authorizing that would do so. But hopefully, the fact that such legislation would be required and need to be publicly discussed would provide some deterrent from doing so, except under very serious circumstances, which I think is the sponsor's intent in putting that forward.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. In the legislation, it spells that out. And as an example, the legislation that I used as a guide was Hamilton County. Hamilton County has a unanimous consent to break through the 15%. I'm just saying that as framework, not necessarily, but that was the purpose or the model that I used to create this.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Simon.
To the left, to hold my colleague in check there to my right. But I'm not sure we need to go through this analysis now about an intention of what a reserve is. I think what we have proposed in the consensus pages you gave to us are well within that range. So I'm not sure we have to spend time now figuring out what the reserve should be or will be. I think we all have a consensus. Let's move forward and go through this, because this is going to take a long time, and I'm not sure we need to establish that at this point, because I think we're going to end up there anyways.
Councilman Schwan.
The reason why I believe we need to be there, contrary to and I guess I sit in the middle, is that it gives a balance, because I believe there's a general consensus that we have to have the macro before we get down to the micro elements, which is what limits are we going to put on ourselves in regards to both reserve funds. And so if we can combine it into one piece of at least agreement, then I believe you'll get the support from those of us who want to have a commitment to reserve fund and a commitment to bring forth the individual proposals that you want to see brought forth. If you do it otherwise, I really believe that you still need to have the macro before you start getting down to the micro components. The only other suggestion would be to bring those two pieces first, pass them and adopt them, and then start spending whatever, as was indicated, up to that limit.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we need to just sort it out and see where we land based upon the consensus documents that we have in front of us that our chair provided. And if I think we're there anyways, but, if we're there, we're there. If we're beyond it, then...
Well, Mr. Chair, there's been a motion and a second. Can we call it a question?
Well,
Do you have a second on your
Chuck?
there is a motion and a second, and I would just point out that the Councilman Greenspan's amendment is a middle course. It's a middle course. You could say that we need to have a permanent policy in place, and it should be incorporated into this legislation, and it would set what the target is, and what you do if you go below the target, and what you do if you have extra money that's above the target, and you could do all those things and do it on a permanent basis. But that's not what we do here. What we do here is simply state what our intent is for the next 2 years of this biennial budget, and then provide a bridge so that over the next few months we can have that full discussion and decide whether we want to have a permanent policy, and if so, what we want that policy to be. So, is there any further discussion? Councilman Germana.
Mr. Chairman, I wholeheartedly agree that we need a bottom line. I mean, we don't have to spend it, but we should have a bottom line, and then to exceed that bottom line, I agree that there should be a higher percentage than just a majority to exceed that. And that shows the fiscal restraint and planning that they've asked us to do.
Okay, Councilwoman Simon.
I'm confused what Mr. Germana is talking about. I thought what Mr. Greenspan's talking about is just a resolution to give us a guideline for the 2-year budget we have before us. What, when we're talking about restraint, are you talking about some permanent policy, Mr. Germana?
Well, what I'm saying is it's written here that we're not going to go less than 25% on the general fund and 15% on the Health and Human Service levy. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. The clerk will please call the roll on Councilman Greenspan's amendment.
Calling the roll to add an item number 10 to this amendment in the form that says the intent of council is to maintain a Health and Human Services levy reserve to expenditure ratio of not less than 15% throughout 2012 and 2013. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
Okay. That provision is incorporated into